Well, joining us now from the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire is the Defence Secretary John Healey. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on this day today.
Good morning.
It is a day for reflection, isn't it? A day for remembering, as we're saying. Do you think that there is enough consciousness of the significance of the today? And, you know, what is the lesson, do you think, that we should take from what happened?
It is a day for reflecting, is a day for remembering, and we're here in the National Arboretum in the far eastern part of the Arboretum, and today's a day to honour and remember the extraordinary service and the sacrifice of so many British and Commonwealth troops in the Far East campaign. They often say we were the forgotten army, and we owe them that duty today to remember what they went through, but also to mark today 80 years on from victory over Japan Day. It was the day that finally put an end to the Second World War. And it is certainly true that Victory in Europe Day 3 months earlier, which we celebrated, of course, in the UK 3 months ago, was a big event. But in the end, the lessons that we take, I think, are that it's the extraordinary sacrifice and what they fought for, the freedoms that we can enjoy today, and the alliances that we had during the Second World War, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, are also now reinforced through the reconciliation with Japan. And I'm proud that Japan is now one of our strongest UK partners in the Indo-Pacific, part of trying to ensure a wider regional security in that part of the world.
The trouble is, I mean, if you look at what is happening in the world right now, aren't we in one of the most precarious positions since 1945? When we look at the stockpiling of nuclear weapons, when we look at the international tensions between countries, how concerned are you about where all of this is heading, and could it happen again?
We are indeed in a new era of threats. It demands a new era for defence, which is why, as a government, we've now made the commitment to the biggest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. And it's why we are redoubling our work leading in NATO, because it's the NATO alliance that ultimately keeps us safe. It's why we're stepping up our support for Ukraine and our work to try and see an end to the fighting in Ukraine, because a secure Ukraine is part of a secure Europe that benefits us in Britain, as well, of course, as the Ukrainians.
John Healey, Defence Secretary, you know, the lessons are surely also about standing up to tyranny and about fighting for freedom. And we have a tyrant, as you've said, in the form of Vladimir Putin. You've made it clear you wouldn't trust him as far as you can throw him. There is Donald Trump currently at a meeting without NATO allies in Alaska. He's talking about land swaps, even offering Putin access to minerals. Now, that has to be accepted by NATO and President Zelensky. If President Zelensky says, I'm not prepared to make that sacrifice and appease to this tyrant, whatever Donald Trump's deal, will Britain stand with Ukraine, even if that means breaking with Donald Trump?
So, look, first of all, Donald Trump is doing what only President Trump can do, which is to bring Putin to the talks. And what President Trump has recognised is that there is an important principle that any discussions or negotiations about Ukraine must involve Ukraine. And so he's talked about the next step of bringing President Zelensky rightly into those discussions. And the questions you pose are really for Ukraine. They're hypotheticals for the future. And our task in the UK with allies, as you saw Keir Starmer coordinating this week ahead of the Alaskan talks, is to increase the diplomacy, as we've been doing this week. And I've been speaking to the Defence Minister in Ukraine and the Secretary of the National Security Council as part of the run-up to today, to step up military aid to Ukraine so that we don't jeopardise the peace by forgetting about the war, and by being ready to step in in the event of a permanent ceasefire with a multinational force led by Britain and France that is prepared to try and secure that peace for the long term. And it's in those ways that we can continue to stand by Ukraine. And I'm very proud the UK has done that from day one. And I'm very proud the UK is united for that.
Well, they might be united, and I suspect that that's true, but it's all about whether or not there's a force in place that could do the business. And you'll be aware that Al Cairns, who's one of your defence ministers, made clear that the army could be expended within 6 to 12 months. He's your minister. Now, I just wonder how it would be if we were to assist Ukraine with boots on the ground, or if we were called to defend that border. That would work, given the army now has just 7,860 trained troops compared to 100,000 over 10 years ago. You're losing soldiers. That's one of the biggest problems. We don't have a military fighting force that is ready to go, do we? Which, when we think about VJ Day and we think about defending freedom, is a rather frightening thing, is it not?
Well, first we must see how the talks and then the negotiations go. We have to see how the ceasefire is secured that allows full-scale negotiations to take place and any negotiated peace. But we, with France, have been leading for the last few months more than 200 military planners from 30 nations to put together what we call the coalition of the willing, ready in those circumstances to step in from day one to help reassure the Ukrainians, to rebuild the strength of the Ukrainians, because in the end it's the Ukrainians that will be the best deterrence and the best defence for themselves against any renewed Russian aggression.
Are you prepared
and we can play a part in those early days of securing the skies and seas as well.
Secretary, are you prepared to put boots on the ground, British boots on the ground? In other words, for British soldiers to risk their lives to defend Ukraine's borders? It's a yes or no, is it not?
Well, a big decision for any Defence Secretary and Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister has made clear that he's ready to consider putting UK boots on the ground in the circumstances of a negotiated peace. If we can play a part, as we're planning to do with many other nations, to reinforce the Ukrainians' ability in the medium term to be able to deter Russia in future for themselves, and to reassure the Ukrainians that just as we have during the battle, we and other nations will stay with them during negotiations, and we will stay with them to try and secure the long-term peace. Because in the end, look, a secure Ukraine means a secure Europe, and it benefits Britain as well.
Also in the news today, MOD is admitting to a serious nuclear incident. We understand this Category A incident occurred between January and April. It had the potential for radioactive release into the environment at Faslane Naval Base in Scotland this year. There doesn't seem to be any further information here. You know, don't the public have a right to know what has happened here and what the risk is?
The public does know, because I made the decision that we will reset our relations and our transparency with Parliament. This has been part of the disclosure of environmental incidents that we are providing to the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, and they've confirmed that there is no point in this incident being a risk to the public, no risk to any of the personnel on the base in the Clyde, despite the quite lurid categorisation that sometimes these environmental incidents carry.
Right.
OK. John Healey, Secretary of State there for Defence, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.